Welcome back, ladies and lizardmen, and today I'm going to be making a tier list about all the crocodilians in the world. Now, for this tier list, I am going to be grouping together a few species that have been split off in recent years, just for the sake of time and simplicity. So, for example, New Guinea crocodiles, Hali, and Nova Guinea. I'm going to count those in the same tier because there's not that much difference, at least physically. So, and same with like Mecistops and Osteolaemus, for example. Alright, so with all that out of the way, let's get into the tier list. Alright, so first going to start off with Yakaru Cayman. Mid-sized crocodilian from the Pantanal River Basin in South America. Neat markings and all that. I'd say solid A tier. Start off with. Alright, Mecistops, African slender stout crocodile. There's two species, Leptorhynchus and Cataphractus. Cataphractus, I believe, is the West African, Leptorhynchus, the Central African. And their range is actually divided by the Cameroon volcanic fault line. So, kind of endangered, more of a forest species. Interesting enough, but I don't know enough about them, and they don't personally interest me, so I'm going to put them in B tier. Alright, Freshie. Now, as Graham Wedd said, the Freshie is actually the thinking man's crocodile. And I wholeheartedly agree with it. One of the fastest on-land speed of all crocodilians. Unfortunately, they are vulnerable to cane toad toxins, unlike their bigger neighbors, the salties. But overall, pretty interesting species. I say it's a pretty solid A tier. Alright, the American crocodile. Crocodilus acutus. A species that's probably going to get broken up pretty soon. A large species that goes into salt water. Yes, that's right, the salty isn't the only species of crocodile to go into salt water. Shocker. So, the only crocodile you can find in the United States, so you know what? I'm going to put it in A tier. Now, you notice I don't have an F tier because no crocodilian is F tier, let's be honest here. Honestly, I don't even think there'll be a D tier going through this. Alright, West African crocodile, Crocodilus niloticus. Used to be just like a type locale of the Nile, but it's now elevated up to its own species. Interesting fact about those, the ancient Egyptians were actually able to differentiate these guys from Niloticus, and they actually preferred them for their temple ceremonies because they're smaller and a lot less aggressive than Niloticus. So, because it's basically the first reptile that ever been used, because it's basically the first reptile to be used in herpetoculture, it's like the foundation of herpetoculture. I think it's worthy of an S tier right there, just on its own. Alright, Paleosuchus palpebrosus, the Cuvier's dwarf caiman. The smallest species of crocodile in the world, although Chinese alligators do give them kind of a run for their money on that. I actually have one of these guys. Pretty interesting little species, and honestly, they're the closest you can have to a perfect pet crocodilian, outside of, again, maybe the Chinese alligator. So just because of that, I'm going to go ahead and put these in A tier. Alright, broad-snouted caiman. Again, kind of interesting species. They have like a bulldog snout, which of their own is pretty interesting. Let's see here. Caiman laterostris, their species name, Caiman laterostris, literally means broad snout. So it's all about that snout. And that's about it. So, B tier. Black caiman, Melanosuchus niger. Basically, melanin crocodile that's black. That's what a scientific name means, if we break it down. Really big, probably the biggest alligatorid, so even bigger than the American alligator. The apex predator of the Amazon. Everyone likes to talk about jaguars killing caimans. This caiman can kill jaguars, so just because of that, I'm going to have to put it in A tier. Alright, Mecistops cataphractus. No, not Mecistops cataphractus. Temistoma schlegeli. Sorry. The false gharial, or the Sunda gharial. I actually did a whole video about these guys and how they're actually probably a true gharial, at least genetically speaking. So, a few interesting factoids about these guys. They have the largest skull of any crocodilian, like of at least any living species of crocodilian. The largest skull we have of living species belongs to these guys. They also have the largest eggs out of any crocodilian, strangely enough. So, a bunch of interesting facts about these guys. Going to put them in A tier. The Chinese alligator. Alligator sinensis. Literally the alligator from China. This guy actually does give the palpebrosus a run for its money for smallest crocodilian. One of, if not the most cold-tolerant species of crocodile on the planet, up there with the American alligator. and critically endangered, unfortunately. So I'm really torn between S and A on these guys. You know what? Just for the endangered species part, go and put them in A. S, I mean. Blech. All right. Paleosuchus trigonatus. Schneider's dwarf caiman, or Schneider's smoothfront caiman. Bit bigger than their little cousin, Palpabrosis. I mean, not by much, but dwarf caiman is a really relative term with these guys because they can actually, a few exceptionally large males can actually get bigger than, say, the average spectacled caiman. So these guys are also the most heavily armored out of any crocodilians, including their belly. They have a pretty solid set of belly armor on them because they spend the most time out of the water of any crocodilian. So they actually have the most laterally compressed xiphidontic teeth out of any crocodilian. So, you know what? That's worthy of S tier in my mind. All right, Orinoco crocodile, Crocodilus intermedius. Now, the reason they're called intermedius in their species name is because their snout is intermediate between that of the slender snouted crocodile and the broad snouted caiman, basically. It's kind of a halfway between the slender species and the broader, sturdier mouth species. Critically endangered, found only in the Orinoco Basin of South America, and even now it's pretty much limited to the more remote upriver regions of it. Possibly the largest crocodilian in the New World, outside of maybe a Acutus. So, pretty solid A tier. Alright. The Cuban crocodile. Crocodilus rhombifer. Rhombifer referring to the squamosal horns on the back of their head. Again, really interesting species. Proportionally the longest legs out of any crocodilian. If you've ever seen videos of these guys running around, it's pretty crazy looking. And back in the Pleistocene, these guys used to hunt on land and hunt ground sloths. Now, this wasn't Megatherium, the giant ground sloth. It was a much smaller species that was maybe 200-300 pounds, so more black bear size. But still, a black bear sized animal with those massive claws, that's a pretty impressive animal to take down. So, I'll put him in S tier. Alright. Oceolamus. Now, I am going to be grouping Oceolamus, Osborni, and Tetrapsis in the same grouping because tier list wise they're practically the same. Osborni being the Congo region of Africa, which they do get a bit bigger, and Tetrapsis, West African region of their range. So Tetrapsis literally means 4 shields, which refers to the armored scutes in the back of their neck. They have 4 of those. And Osborni, referring to Osborn, a very prominent herpetologist. So, these guys also spend a lot of time on land compared to other crocodilians, so I'm going to go ahead and put them in A tier. Alright. Caiman crocodilus. The spectacled caiman. The rat of the crocodile world. Average size, above average reproductive rate, probably the most well suited to adapting to human changes to the environment. Pretty much the definition of B tier of crocodilians, in my opinion. Alright, the mugger crocodile, Crocodilus palustris. Native to India, Pakistan, and even a small sliver of southeastern Iran, of all places. Again, kind of average, so I'm just going to put these guys in B tier. Alright. Crocodilus siamensis, the Siamese crocodile. Again, native to, well, you guessed it, Siam, so modern-day Thailand, but also was native to Borneo and Sumatra, some of the larger islands of Indonesia. Critically endangered, also has some very large squamosal horns, just like rhombifer, and is also one of the most vocal crocodilians. So, I think that's pretty solid A tier. Alright. Crocodilus niloticus, the Nile crocodile. Probably the most iconic of all crocodilians, up there with the salties and the American alligator. Native to East Africa, basically from Egypt all the way down to South Africa. What else is there to say about them? They're basically the crocodile you see on National Geographic, so S tier. Alright. The gharial, Gavialis gangeticus. Gangeticus referring to the Ganges River, which used to be the heartland of their range, but just due to the vast amount of human degradation of their habitat, They're very much limited in range now to only a few tributaries of the Ganges River, and even some non-tributaries, just a few isolated pockets here and there. Now, these guys are the most aquatically adapted of all crocodilians, so much so that adults are the only species of crocodilian that can't fully stand up on land. They can only belly slide. And the males have the gara, so that big bump all the way at the front of their snout. So they're actually one of the most sexually dimorphic of any crocodilians, so I'd say it's pretty solid A. A Philippine crocodile. Probably the most endangered species of crocodilian on the planet. So your Crocodilus mindorensis, Mindoro Island. So, these guys are just some of the meanest of all crocodilians for some reason. So, C tier. I know. Alright. The Morlae's crocodile. Crocodilus morlaei. Often also known as the Mexican crocodile. So, named to the Gulf Coast of central southern Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula, and Belize. And I believe also Honduras as well, but double check that. But these guys, getting pretty average, so just going to put them in B tier. Although I will say this about their back osteoderms. They're actually really smooth. Some of the smoothest you'll see out of any of the crocodilus. Alright. New Guinea crocodiles. Crocodilus nova guinea and Crocodilus hallei. Nova Guinea, the originally described species from the northern side of the island, and hallei is from the southern half of the island of New Guinea. I'm going to put up a range map right now. So you can see it's pretty clear divide down the middle of the island, and that's due to just the upland regions of the island, including the Owen Stanley Mountains, to name a few of the upland regions. That acts as a pretty solid geographic barrier between the two species. So that's allowed some genetic drift to allow these species to split off. Now, physiologically, very similar to each other. In fact, they're so similar to each other, they had a hard time actually elevating these guys to separate species status. Genetically, however, they're very clearly own species. Now, hallei is actually named after Dr. Hall, a famous herpetologist from the University of Florida. So, just because it's named after a prominent herpetologist, go put him in A tier. The American alligator. Alligator mississippiensis. The first crocodilian I've ever worked with. Probably the most, well, not the most, but I'd say top 5 most iconic North American animals. They're so good that zoos all over the world want American alligators. Zoos in Australia, hey, can we get an American alligator, mate? Zoos in England, excuse me, Colonial, can we get an American alligator? Zoos in Germany, hey, the Soviets stole the alligators at the war, so we need to replenish our stocks. Yeah, fun fact, Hitler actually had a pet personal alligator at the Berlin Zoo that the Soviets then took back to the Soviet Union, and I think it's still alive today. Let's double check that. Overall, obvious A tier. Oh, and also, again, I'm tied with the Chinese alligator little cousin for being the most cold tolerant, while also still being big. So, definition of A tier in my opinion. S tier in my opinion. All right, last but not least, Crocodilus porosus, the saltwater crocodile. The largest of all living reptiles on the planet. The most the most marine-going of all crocodilians. In all honesty, it is kind of the S or A tier. However, the Aussies are really annoying about how they're always hyping theirs up. So I'm just going to tick them off. I'm just going to take the Aussies off and put them in C tier. Yeah. I'm not doing this out of honesty. I'm doing this out of spite. So, yeah, that's a tier list. Let me know what your thoughts in the comments below, and if you have any ideas of other tier lists you want to see done with reptiles, feel free to hit me up on Instagram and in the comments. Until next time, thanks.